Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Today we're going to talk about what to do and, more importantly, what not to do when you're building during wartime. Okay, so in today's video, we're going to talk through a few tips and tricks of what to do and, more importantly, what not to do when you're building during wartime. Really, this has been triggering me lately, so I thought I'd make a video about it. I've been fighting a lot the last few days, and combined with work, really haven't been able to put out a new video in a bit. But, got some time on the weekend, and I'm getting triggered with some of our building habits. So, figured this would be a good topic for a video. Okay, you ever go to like a dentist's office or something, and you see a sign on the wall that says, "Please don't stick your tongue into the light socket"? You're like, okay, how stupid is that? Well, there's a reason there's a sign here, and that kind of goes to our first tip. Do not AFK build during wartime. You're just asking you to get your marches ghost faced very easily. If you're going AFK on the battlefield, you shouldn't go on AFK on the battlefield. Period. If you have to throw your troops into a city, something like that, do not AFK build on the battlefield. Pretty easy tip number one. Okay, tip number two has to do with the engineering soft cap threshold. I made a video about this earlier, but just to refresh everyone, as soon as you're at 11.3 building speed, you've met the soft cap threshold. And basically what that means is no matter the size of the unit, no matter the engineering value of a unit you add to a building, like for example a tower here, you're going to get the same effect, right? So right now I have I think it's just a single unit troop. Yeah, Chakcha here is building with a single tier 1 infantry. You can see right now it's 12.82 when he's not on it. I'm going to add him to it. Goes up to 13.12. You're going to get 0.3 build speed per second anytime you add a new unit to whatever you're building. That's all you're going to get. So just as comparison here, I'll take Chakcha off here and I'll add my Kuma Laquan Mark 310,000 tier 5 troops. Go to the building here. And you see 13.12. So it doesn't matter, basically, once you've met that soft cap engineering threshold, the size of your unit you're going to add to a building. Okay. Now, look, there are some scenarios where you'd want the stronger unit building. If you're in, a combat area, the stronger unit's can be able to defend itself better. Obviously, the one troop unit, as soon as it hits, it's going to die. And if you're trying to hold the building, trying to push back or whatever, it'll give you some redundancy. You can fight better there. But if you are going to AFK build, why would you send 310,000 tier 5 troops when you can send a single tier 1 troop and get the same effect, right? So if I am going to AFK build, don't recommend it, but obviously sometimes it happens, or you're building with your farm or something like that. Send a single unit build out, right? Because most of the time it's going to do the same thing. And if my single unit troop dies, I mean, who cares? Okay, so our first tip, don't AFK build, no big surprise there. Second tip, remember your engineering soft cap. Third tip, consider using one unit builders, so if they die, it's not a big deal. The fourth tip is do not use engineering heroes to build. Now, there's an exception to this, and we'll talk through it later on. But for example, if I'm not building this tower right now, if I want to create a new unit to build that tower, it's always going to default to Ordo and Craig, assuming I have those heroes available. And the reason it defaults to Ordo and Craig is they have the holistic skills for engineering. They also have the engineering talent trees. But there's a couple things here, right? First, it doesn't really matter. You can see this tower is building at 12.82, so we've already hit the engineering soft cap. So it does not matter whether or not I have a full unit building there, whether I have a lot of engineering points building there. I just need to get a unit there, and literally I can use any hero I want. Let's say, the new Casey Jones here, I can use a single unit of tier 1 infantry and have him build that, and it'll be fine, right? It'll give you the same effect. If you're going to build with a one unit troop, just use whoever, right? But if you're building with like a full march for whatever reason, have that full march be combat effective. And so have good heroes equipped to that march that are good for that unit type. So if I was going to build with infantry, I'd go have Nkuma and Laquan build with it. So if they do get attacked, they can fight back. I'm getting good value of my infantry, right? So if I send 310,000 tier 5 infantry with Craig and Ordo out here, that's basically useless. 310,000 infantry with Kuma Laquan, they can do some damage, they'll live a long time, and so I'll get value from my infantry. And so what it really comes down to is, am I going to one troop build? If I'm going to one troop build, just use a hero that you don't care about, so if they die and take the stamina penalty, it's not a big deal. But if you're going to build with a full unit, build with heroes that make that full unit do well. Do not build with Ordo Craig, build with, Lakon and Kuma or Gorsh Skogul at least or whatever. If you have your tier 5 infantry on the front lines and you're fighting with them and you're building on the side, okay, don't use your tier 5 infantry to build, but use usually like a Madeline Garwood or something you can get some value for that infantry just in case they come under attack. And hey, look, the same thing's true if you don't build with infantry. And like I said, it's really not necessary to build with infantry. You can build with any troop type as long as you've hit that soft cap. If you're building with cavalry, use cav heroes. If you're building with mages, use mage heroes, whatever. Okay, I mentioned earlier there was one scenario where you do really care about the engineering skill of your units. And that's basically in scenarios where you're restricted to only destroying with flying units. So as an example here, see this FR tower. Let's say that I was pushing this, this plateau and they're fighting up the ramp here. But they also want to destroy this tower, in the meantime. They do touch it with this territory here, but it's tough to get units here. You could blink infantry up or whatever, but in an intense battle, you're really only going to be able to consistently destroy this tower with flying units. Okay, a very strong tack is to send a single unit of Wyvern Riders to help destroy whatever building. That's good, but you still need that base level of engineering destruction to get it up. And the issue with flyers is their base level of engineering is actually lower than everything else, right? So take a look at my tier 5 Celestials. They're engineering 4. It's the same for all flyers, right? Wyvern Riders and Eagles all have a base engineering of 4 at tier 5. That's lower than other troops, right? The Vestals themselves have a base engineering of 5 at tier 5. And then, of course, the best is infantry at tier 5. Their base engineering is all the way up at 14, right? So to get that minimum threshold, if you have a full unit of infantry, you're going to do it. What if you can't have a full unit of infantry, specifically if you can only destroy from range? Well, you really need, in that one scenario, to have a good engineering hero, and basically what you're going to be looking for is Craig, right? We used to have 3 engineering heroes, but, a few patches ago, they changed Nico. Nico is no longer an engineering hero. Hey, that's a buff to Nico. But for engineering purposes, we've only got Ordo. Yeah, he's fine. But the good thing about Craig is Craig himself flies, and so for Craig, it is very useful to have Craig, spec'd out in the engineering tree with the good engineering artifact. So in those scenarios when he's leading a full unit of Wyvern Riders, you need Craig to hit that engineering soft cap, or maybe you might even need 2 Craigs leaving Wyvern Riders to hit the engineering soft cap. That's the one scenario where the engineering tree really comes in handy. Okay, what about the engineering skills? Remember, all the engineering skills now are holistic. Basically, that means is once you've unlocked them, all your heroes get them all the time, regardless of who's leading the march. So the engineering skills, if you're starting up the game, it's nice to get Craig and Ordo's engineering skills up, but once you get them up, you do not need them to lead those marches. Only their talent trees matter, and really the only scenario where the talent tree is going to matter a lot is when you can only destroy with actual flying units, and that's why Craig can be value in that one specific circumstance. Okay, that was tip number 4. We only got one tip left for you, and that's tip number 5. It's a pretty simple one, but this is another one like, hey, don't stick your tongue into the light socket level tip, because I see a ton of people not do this. When you go to build a building, you pretty much want to have that unchecked. What that will mean is when you finish building the building, your unit's going to go home. If you have this checked, when you finish building the building, your unit's just going to stay there. All right, now that seems obvious, but particularly when you're in a combat zone, you might have to go AFK, maybe you lose your internet connection, whatever. Let's say you hold the territory and you finish building the building. That's great. Well, the problem is what happens, hey, you went AFK, you forgot your troops were there. If that box is unchecked, it's good. If it's not unchecked, you'll see scenarios like this where these buildings were finished building a day ago. And if the enemy ever pushes up here, these units are just going to be slaughtered, right? So it's a pretty obvious trick. Make sure when you build a new building, unless you have a good reason otherwise, this box should be unchecked. Right, hey, that's all I got for you today. Just wanted to give you a few tips and tricks of what to do and more importantly, what not to do when building during wartime. And until next time, you stay classy, Belron.